I've heard from so many of you that when you put a solid tire on your scooter, the ride is bumpier. So today we're looking at a solution to fix that with the Monorim V3 front suspension for your Xiaomi M-365 or Hover One scooter. The installation instructions from the manufacturer weren't very clear to me, and there are definitely a few things that didn't work out correctly in this install, so stick around to the end to catch all the details. This is the toolkit that actually comes with the front suspension. There's a 16 and 18 millimeter opened-in wrench in there, as well as some Allen wrenches that you'll need to get some of the nuts off. There's an extra spring included for different weight distribution in the kit, as well as several nuts and bolts. We're gonna go ahead and pull out that front suspension from the foam packing. Take note of that little metal rod that you still see there in the foam. That actually is needed later, and I missed that, but you need that for the install. This is what it looks like when you pull it out of the box. There's already a spring installed in that suspension. This thing weighs about 6 pounds, and you can get it from Amazon fairly quickly. I'll put a link down in the description below so that you can get it yourself. I went ahead and laid everything out and organized it so I'd be able to get to it. So let's get started taking this front wheel off, because that's actually the first step in the install. You'll need to peel back that reflective decal, just like I've done in the other scooter tire replacement videos. Once you remove those 4 screws, you can pull the cap off, and that'll give you access to that nut that you're going to need to loosen to get the wheel off. I'm going to explain later in the video why you won't be putting these caps back on, but suffice it to say, the new suspension actually comes down and replaces this arm that fits around the tire. So we're going to go to the other side and go ahead and peel that reflective decal back as well, and take those 4 screws out too. Again, it's a fairly simple process. You just need a Phillips head screwdriver to pop all 4 of them off, and then go ahead and take your wrench out and loosen that nut up. Note that on this side you can actually remove the nut entirely from the wheel axle, but on the other side you can't do that because of the power wire that goes into the motor inside of that wheel. You're gonna have to work around this wire as you pull the wheel off, because you can't completely detach it without taking out all of the motor accessories inside of the wheel. So once we have the wheel tucked away to the side, we're gonna go ahead and flip that top handle down with the latch that comes with it, and take your Allen wrench inside and start to unscrew this black screw that's in the center of this arm. Once you pull that out, set it to the side, and then take your Allen wrench. Again, I'm using one that I like because it gives me a better grip, but you can use the ones that come in the kit as well. So take that Allen wrench and loosen up both sides of this grip that's on top of this steering arm, and then you'll be able to pull the entire assembly off of the mount that it comes on, just like that. Once you do that, you're gonna wanna set that to the side and turn the scooter upside down to go ahead and get to this Allen wrench that is in the area where the tire that you just pulled off came from. For me, it was very difficult to use the Allen wrench that came with the kit. I ended up needing something with a better grip, but once I pulled it out, it was easy enough to get this rain guard off, the splash guard. You're gonna wanna put that back on later so that you don't get water up on you as you're riding the scooter. You're gonna take this cap off, and then looking at the next part, this was a little bit more difficult to get off, so I used a screwdriver to slide both sides of this. What this is basically a retainer ring that allows you to not be able to oversteer it, because if you turn it too far to the right or too far to the left, ultimately you can end up bending and stretching the wires that go to the controls up on the steering column. I've had someone do that before, and I ended up having to sniff out where the short was in the wire and correct it by putting it back together. Okay, so this piece we're gonna go ahead and throw away, because we're going to mount the new suspension in place of where that went. Take careful note of what you're pulling off here, because you're gonna wanna put these back on in order. You're gonna slide this into the insert and put it up tight before you put the cap pieces back on. We're going to slide this bearing ring and the other 2 pieces that came with it down over the neck inside this mount, so that the scooter is able to turn freely and the suspension will be ultimately locked back up into place. One of the issues that I had was this screw was too long to put that rain guard back on, so I thought, well, I'll just take a saw and cut the screw off. As it turns out later, they actually include shorter screws in the install kit with you, and I didn't need to cut that screw off. But I didn't notice that at first, knowing too that this suspension kit is designed mostly for the M365 Xiaomi scooter and not necessarily for the Hover One, although I was able to adapt it mostly to get it fit. I did have a little bit of trouble trying to get some of these rings back on top of the suspension after I put it back together, but ultimately it did go back into place and I was able to get the top back onto the suspension as instructed. Make sure that you snag this bolt out of the styrofoam. This is the one piece that I couldn't find later. I saw in the instructions and I couldn't figure out where that piece was supposed to be. It wasn't in the suspension as it came out of the box. It was actually in the styrofoam. You're gonna wanna slide that bolt through and then you're gonna put those little pieces on inside of there to allow it to freely slide without rubbing against the side of the neck. So slide that bolt through, put those big washers on, and then slide it the rest of the way through. There's a screw that goes in on the other side. You'll need 2 Allen wrenches, one on each side to get this fully tightened. I will note that the more you tighten this, the tighter the suspension is from a moving up and down perspective. So that's one of the things that you want to keep in mind when you tighten this down later. It's not really a great idea to over tighten that, just get it tight enough. I was impressed with the overall construction of this suspension as well as all the parts that they include and the tools that come with the kit. So now we're ready to go ahead and put that steering column back on the top. Take note that there is a control piece in there that you need to make sure you have oriented correctly so that your scooter turns left and right without oversteering. We're gonna put the Allen wrench screw back inside the middle that we pulled out earlier and tighten that down. Again, if you over tighten this is one of those things that will limit your ability to steer turning left and right. So make sure that it's tight enough, but not too tight. And lastly, as we wrap up the top part of this assembly, you're gonna grab your Allen wrench again and start to tighten those nuts that are along the side so that you can tighten the clamp back down onto the steering column that we were using earlier. It is easy to get fatigued at this point. This is a couple hours into this install. I believe that if you're an expert, you could probably do it fairly quickly in 30 minutes or less. But if this is your first time and you don't really have a good video to help you out, it may take you much longer to complete this install process. Next, I'm going to check all of the other Allen wrench heads on the front of the suspension and make sure that everything is tight as it should be. And we're gonna go ahead and align this wheel back up into the new mounts that are on the new forks that come with the suspension. Looking at those washers where there's a little tab that's up at the top, you want to make sure that those are oriented correctly to keep that from turning the wrong way when you've got the scooter lined up later. So we're gonna put the nuts back on both sides, being careful with the power cable to the motor. This time I'm going to use a socket on the install to tighten both of these nuts down. Well, I can't use a socket on the side with the wire. I'll have to use an open-ended wrench, but I'm going to use my tools instead of the tools that came with it. I feel like these are a little bit sturdier, and especially when I'm starting to tighten things back down, I want a good top quality wrench. Lastly, one of the problems that I had with these caps is the holes that the caps that I had do not line up with the screw holes for the Monorim suspension that comes with the kit. I was actually able to get 2 of the screws in on one side, but looking at the other side, the screws don't even line up at all. There's only 3, maybe 4 screw holes on that side, and they don't line up. So we're gonna go without the caps on this point because we don't really need them. I don't feel like boring out new screw holes, but you could do that if you wanted to. Obviously, this is for the M365 caps. Let's go ahead and take it out for an actual test and see how it does. You can see here that we just have the front suspension. Nash does make a rear suspension as well, if the suspension has been an issue for you. But this thing rides so much smoother with the suspension installed on the scooter. You can see that the solid tires don't give you the same kind of ride that a pneumatic tire does, but this suspension is absolutely wonderful. There are links down in the description below if you want to pick up yours. It's less than $100 from Amazon, and if you've upgraded your tire, this is a great addition to get you that suspension that you're looking for, especially on those longer rides where you're looking to be comfortable. I do a lot of these how I did it type videos, and if you like this kind of content, please smash that like button and subscribe, and go ahead and check out some of the other videos around scooters that I've done before. Thanks for watching.